Editor's note: the opinions in this article are the author's, as published by our content partner, and do not represent the views of MSN or Microsoft. In 2011, I was hired, straight out of college, to work at the White House and eventually the National Security Council. My job there was to promote and protect the best of what my country stands for. I am a hijab-wearing Muslim woman. I was the only hijabi in the West Wing, and the Obama administration always made me feel welcome and included. Like most of my fellow American Muslims, I spent much of 2016 watching with consternation as Donald Trump vilified our community. Despite this or because of it, I thought I should try to stay on the NSC staff during the Trump administration, in order to give the new president and his aides a more nuanced view of Islam, and of America's Muslim citizens. I lasted 8 days. When Trump issued a ban on travelers from 7 Muslim-majority countries and all Syrian refugees, I knew I could no longer stay and work for an administration that saw me and people like me not as fellow citizens, but as a threat. The evening before I left, bidding farewell to some of my colleagues, many of whom have also since left, I notified Trump's senior NSC communications advisor, Michael Anton, of my departure, since we shared an office. His initial surprise, asking whether I was leaving government entirely, was followed by silence almost in caution. Not asking why, I told him anyway. I told him I had to leave because it was an insult walking into this country's most historic building every day under an administration that is working against and vilifying everything I stand for as an American and as a Muslim. I told him that the administration was attacking the basic tenets of democracy. I told him that I hoped that they and those in Congress were prepared to take responsibility for all the consequences that would attend their decisions. He looked at me and said nothing. It was only later that I learned he authored an essay under a pseudonym, extolling the virtues of authoritarianism and attacking diversity as a weakness, and Islam as incompatible with the modern West. My whole life and everything I have learned proves that facile statement wrong. My parents immigrated to the United States from Bangladesh in 1978 and strove to create opportunities for their children born in the States. My mother worked as a cashier, later starting her own daycare business. My father spent late nights working at Bank of America, and was eventually promoted to assistant vice president at one of its headquarters. Living the American dream, wouldn't have family barbecues, trips to Disney World, impromptu soccer or football games, and community service projects. My father began pursuing his PhD, but in 1995 he was killed in a car accident. I was 12 when I started wearing a hijab. It was encouraged in my family, but it was always my choice. It was a matter of faith, identity, and resilience for me. After 9/11, everything would change. On top of my shock, horror, and heartbreak, I had to deal with the fear some kids suddenly felt towards me. I was glared at, cursed at, and spat at in public and in school. People called me a terrorist and told me, "Go back to your country." My father taught me a Bengali proverb inspired by Islamic scripture: when a man kicks you down, get back up, extend your hand, and call him brother. Peace, patience, persistence, respect, forgiveness and dignity. These were the values that we carried through my life and my career. I never intended to work in government. I was among those who assumed the government was inherently corrupt and ineffective. Working in the Obama White House proved me wrong. You can't know or understand what you haven't been a part of. Still, inspired by President Obama, I joined the White House in 2011. After graduating from the George Washington University, I had interned there during my junior year, reading letters and taking calls from constituents at the Office of Presidential Correspondence. It felt surreal. Here I was, a 22-year-old American Muslim American woman from Maryland who had been mocked and called names for covering my hair, working for the President of the United States. In 2012, I moved to the West Wing to join the Office of Public Engagement, where I worked with various communities, including American Muslims, on domestic issues such as health care. In early 2014, Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes offered me a position on the National Security Council, NSC. For 2.5 years I worked down the hall from the Situation Room, advising President Obama's engagements with American Muslims, and working on issues ranging from advancing relations with Cuba and Laos to promoting global entrepreneurship among women and youth. A harsher world began to re-emerge in 2015. In February, 3 young American Muslim students were killed in their Chapel Hill home by an Islamophobe. Both the media and administration were slow to address the attack, as if the dead had to be vetted before they could be mourned. It was emotionally devastating. But when a statement was finally released condemning the attack and mourning their loss, Rhodes took me aside to tell me how grateful he was to have me there and wished there were more American Muslims working throughout government. America's government and decision-making should reflect its people. Later that month, the evangelist Franklin Graham declared that the government had been infiltrated by Muslims. One of my colleagues sought me out with a smile on his face and said, if only he knew they were in the halls of the West Wing, and briefed the President of the United States multiple times. I thought, damn right, I'm here, exactly where I belong, a proud American dedicated to protecting and serving my country. Graham's hateful provocations weren't new. Over the Obama years, right-wing websites spread an abundance of absurd conspiracy theories and lies, targeting some American Muslim organizations and individuals, even those of us serving in government. They called us terrorists, Sharia law whisperers, or Muslim Brotherhood operatives. Little did I realize that some of these conspiracy theorists would someday end up in the White House. Over the course of the campaign, even when I was able to storm through the bad days, I realized the rhetoric was taking a toll on American communities. When Trump first called for a Muslim ban, reports of hate crimes against Muslims spiked. The trend of anti-Muslim hate crimes is ongoing, as mosques are set on fire and individuals attacked. 6 were killed at a mosque in Canada by a self-identified Trump supporter. Throughout 2015 and 2016, I watched with disbelief, apprehension, and anxiety, as Trump's style of campaigning instigated fear and emboldened xenophobes, anti-Semites, and Islamophobes. While cognizant of the possibility of Trump winning, I hoped a majority of the electorate would never condone such a hateful and divisive worldview. During the campaign last February, Obama visited a Baltimore mosque and reminded the public that we're one American family, and when any part of our family starts to feel separate, broken, it's a challenge to our values. His words would go unheeded by his successor. The climate in 2016 felt like it did just after 9/11. What made it worse was that this fear and hatred were being fueled by Americans in positions of power. 5th grade students at a local Sunday school where I volunteered shared stories of being bullied by classmates and teachers, feeling like they didn't belong here anymore, and asked if they might get kicked out of this country if Trump won. I was almost hit by a car by a white man laughing as he drove by in a Costco parking lot, and on another occasion was followed out of the metro by a man screaming profanities, "FKU, FK Islam, Trump will send you back." Then, on election night, I was left in shock. The morning after the election, we lined up in the West Colonnade as Obama stood in the Rose Garden and called for national unity and a smooth transition. Trump seemed the antithesis of everything we stood for. I felt lost. I could not fully grasp the idea that he would soon be sitting where Obama sat. I debated whether I should leave my job. Since I was not a political appointee, but a direct hire of the NSC, I had the option to stay. The incoming and now departed National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, had said things like fear of Muslims is rational. Some colleagues and community leaders encouraged me to stay, while others expressed concern for my safety. Cautiously optimistic, and feeling a responsibility to try to help them continue our work and be heard, I decided that Trump's NSC could benefit from a colored, female, hijab-wearing, American Muslim patriot. The weeks leading up to the inauguration prepared me and my colleagues for what we thought would come, but not for what actually came. On Monday, January 23, I walked into the Eisenhower Executive Office building, with the new staffers there. Rather than the excitement I encountered when I first came to the White House under Obama, the new staff looked at me with a cold surprise. The diverse White House I had worked in became a monochromatic and male bastion. The days I spent in the Trump White House were strange, appalling and disturbing. As one staffer serving since the Reagan administration said, "This place has been turned upside down. It's chaos. It we never witnessed